Tara, what is the best website/app for mindfulness meditation?
Oh, well, I will tell you my personal favorite is 10% Happier. I think that that is, hands down one of the best. Full disclosure, many of my teachers are on that app. That app was Dan Harris, the ABC News guy, along with some folks that are actually based in Boston. So it's a local company, which makes it even more desirable from my perspective. So I think it's really good because there's a lot of options on that app. So I would highly recommend it. Another Headspace is good too. It's got more of an animated look and feel. So I think that, but again, I'll tell you that mostly what I go for is like the quality of the instruction. And I'm a bit of a stickler for that. And I think both of those are absolutely superb. A website, mindful.org, again, like we know the publisher and the editor, they have a lot of integrity. And you could go to that website and put almost anything into the search box. Like I'll often get questions about, I have a child with ADHD, where can I find some good resources? So I will often recommend going to mindful.org and just kind of like working your way around that website. It's really, really good. And John's going to provide a bunch of resources. Like we have a resource guide we've put together of our favorite books and apps and all that. So.
Yes, I would be remiss if I did not mention that our own website has a lot of the resources that Tara was just referring to and more, and that is harvardpilgrim.org/mindthemoment. And I will flash that up on the screen later after we take a few more questions.
John. Yes.
All right, so here's a really good one, Tara. How much time is typical between quiet mind periods and distracting thoughts? The person says, I feel I only get a few seconds of quiet time between those distracting thoughts.
Yeah, so love that you're even seeing that because that is progress. It's different for everybody and also depending on what's going on in one's life is going to make that busyness either more active or less active. But I will say that the majority of people have just a ton of busyness. So I couldn't give you an exact time frame, but you know what? I think, and this I think might have come from Sharon Salzberg at some point a long time ago, but I loved it, is, you know what? Just focus on one breath in and then one breath out, because the thoughts are really rapid. And you, in a way, and I really mean this, you don't even have to worry about that. I think it's annoying, because we have so many thoughts. And when we sit without distraction, we bring them into stark relief in a way. But I would say even let go of a concern of how often or how much time between thoughts, it's going to really vary. And just know this is what minds do. All minds are very, very busy. If you start to sit long retreats or something like that, you'll get more space in there, but yeah.
So this is more of a comment than a question, but I really liked it. The person says, I started practicing mindfulness in conjunction with reading the principles of the Stoic philosophers and found that these two work well together. One helps the other. I think what's being pointed to here, which I like, is that mindfulness does not have to be the only thing that a person is or involved with. It does support other sorts of practices.
Yeah. Yes, it's so complementary. It can inform and enhance whatever religious tradition you're involved with or not, so it's, yeah.
All right, so this person asks, when I focus on my breath, sometimes I realize that there's a tightness making it difficult to take a deep breath. Is that common?
Yeah, it's common, and I would say what is very common is the fact that we're keying in and narrowing in our attention on breath sensation can, in fact, sometimes alter the way we're breathing. And so there's a couple techniques I would say with that is We didn't do this, but maybe as a way to close, if there's time, I'll lead us in another short meditation where we actually start by taking a deep inhalation through the nose and an exhalation through the mouth, and doing that a couple times just as a way to settle any surface tension and begin to, I mean, the body has a lot of wisdom, and you can trust that the breathing will regulate on its own. But if you're having trouble with the breath and it seems like, it's not going away and it's in fact becoming distracting, just move the object of your attention to something different. So you could move it to sound, you could put your hands together, or you could put them on your thighs and come back to that point of contact. You could use the points of contact with the back of the body in the chair, noticing. So you can play around with it a little bit. What's important, not so much as what you're choosing, but the quality of attention you bring to that thing, because that's really going to help stabilize attention.
All right, Tara. So somebody watching has clearly seen you before, because she's asking if you would talk a bit more about Sarah Lazar's research that she did at I guess Harvard Medical School. Yeah, or Mass General.
Yeah. Sarah Lazar is a friend and a friend of our program, and has come to speak a number of times. And I really, she was out of the gate really early. And I want to say 2005, she took a group of people in the Boston area, brought them into Mass General, did functional MRI, baseline data on sort of their brains, put them through 8 weeks of meditation, put them back in the functional MRI. And she noticed, you can actually find her research if you go to the Lazar lab at Mass General. You could find that particular study. But with some of the things that she found were that there was greater activation in the prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain that is kind of the rational thought. That's what's often, the limbic system in the reptilian brain, when we're under stress, don't allow that prefrontal cortex to come online. Sarah's research showed that the part of the brain associated with fight or flight actually became less active. So that part of the brain became less active, the amygdala, and there was more activity in the prefrontal cortex. And the posterior cingulate cortex, the hypothalamus involved with memory, impulse control, that part of the brain had, which I think is the posterior cingulate cortex, had more activity. So Sarah's, I'm a huge fan. And so that's a little bit of her.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot, Tara, because I can't quite recall this myself. I know her most recent research is on aging and the brain.
Oh, yeah. Yes. She's doing a research project with people in the early stages of dementia, and I know the research is not out yet, so we don't have any detail on it. But it's a long, I think it's a multi-year study.
So keep your eyes open for that. So there's somebody's asking a kind of a two-part question. I'm going to ask you these parts one after the other. So, or I'll let you answer the first part first. What difference in my state of mind should I expect to notice after 2 to 3 weeks of doing the 5 by 5 by 5 practice?
Yeah.
So practicing 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week for a few weeks.
Yeah. So a common question is, how do I know it's working? And I think to some degree, that's part of that question. What can I expect to see, or what can I expect to notice? What I often tell people is to start to pay attention to, how your life is going. Do you have a little bit more, think about the things that typically provoke you, whether that is traffic or some of the daily annoyances of life, or whatever that might be, and just start to notice, do you have like a little bit more space with that situation or with that person? Are you a little bit less contracted? So what you might start to notice is some degree, and again, relative to that short amount of practice, but some degree of having a little bit more room, a little less reactivity, a little bit more responsive to a situation. And sometimes, I might have a difficult thing arise that I feel like I handled well. And then I'm like, oh, like this is what practice can do. And it's, not always. I mean, I'm human and I am involved in this. I'm committed to this for a lifetime. And so, to also be easy on yourself if you don't get every situation perfectly. But what this practice does is even in the early stages, it'll highlight those annoyances for you, because what often happens is the annoyance arises without conscious awareness, and then reactivity happens. So that's saying or doing something that just doesn't quite align with how you really want to be on a day-to-day basis. So start to, notice if there's like a little bit more room.
All right. So, second part of that question was: is there a special type of music to accompany the 5-minute meditation sessions?
Did you say music, John?
Music.
Especially
That's right.
music? Yeah. Not that I know of. Um, the only thing I would say about music is that it can stimulate the mind a little bit. So it's possible that a favorite song comes on, and then you wonder if that artist is playing somewhere. And so there might be somebody else that could answer that question better than I could, because and in my practice in the insight tradition, using music has never been part of it. So, but that's not to say that's not possible. I'm not skilled to answer that.
All right. So, another two-part question. I'll ask both parts at once here. All right. So,
Okay.
how do you suggest we practice mindfulness meditation during these times of so much injustice? Also, do you have any suggestions on mindfulness sites that cater to the Black community?
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, and I spoke a little bit to this early on in opening up, is that I think that what is happening both in terms of racial injustice and the pandemic that we're in is that the arising of so many emotions is common and normal. It's normal. And they can run the gamut from, shame and guilt to fear and to anxiety. This is a practice of turning toward those emotions. And I talked in one of the coffee houses, it might have been last Friday, John, I think, or a couple weeks ago. Anyway, recently, about what it means to actually turn toward an emotion. The acronym RAIN is a really good one for working with the challenging, difficult emotions that arise. So I would recommend, and again, RAIN, there's a good description of that on mindful.org. So you can also go to YouTube and hear other teachers talking about how to use that. But again, this idea of turning toward the emotion, coming out of the intellect and coming into the body and feeling fear, grief, shame, uncertainty, and asking yourself, how does this show up physically? What am I feeling? What am I feeling physically? The 10% Happier app right now is doing a lot of work around racial injustice and have brought on a number of speakers to talk about it. So Sebene Selassie is one teacher that I think is fantastic. African-American woman who's done a lot of work in this area. Ruth King is another. Rhonda McGee. These are all people that you can Google to learn more about the work that they're doing. And Ruth and Rhonda both have books on mindfulness and racial justice. So I would check those out. And I know there's a people of color retreat that happens every year at the Insight Meditation Society. Now, because we can't gather that, but I think they're going to do that online. There's also a group of teachers, people of color, that have formed communities. So there's a lot out there.
Okay, so this is a great one. Self-meditation versus guided meditation.
Yeah.
Is one better than the other?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I love that. No, I would not say one is better than the other. And in fact, I have been at this for many, many years, and I still really enjoy a guided meditation. And it's not, I think the way to think about it is whatever is going to be most supportive for you. And there might be times where you feel like, I just want some guidance. I mean, this practice, if you're doing it by yourself at home, which many of us are, can feel a bit like a lonely practice. So knowing that you're practicing with others, like Insight Timer is a great one, because you can actually see all around the world where everybody is practicing at the same time that you are, and who. So guided is great. I play around with both. I do both. So.
All right. So, okay. So the person's asking about he or she has been meditating for some time, but how do they know, or how can they assess whether or not they're actually doing it correctly? Is there a way to measure, how well it's going?
Ah, yeah, it's such a common response to not think you're doing it correctly, which is why I have added the Chris Willard slide, because, the idea, if I really just break this down to the simplicity of this practice, we are literally, and there are different, as you advance in practice, there are different ways that you can engage in practice with something called open awareness or objectless awareness. But I'm not going to go there right now, and I'm just simply going to say, keep it really simple. You want to pick something like a body sensation, preferably breath sensation or hands touching or hands, that is where you are going to bring your attention. You're going to rest or anchor, allow that to serve as an anchor for the wandering mind. The mind will wander, so you are doing it correctly. As you notice the mind wanders and you bring the attention back, that's how you do it. That's correct. And then the mind goes off again and you bring the attention back. These practices are simple but not easy. I feel like they are really deeply challenging in a lot of ways, because when you remove the typical distractions of your life, and we have a lot going on, but when you sit without anything, you are leaving room for lots of things to arise. So lots of emotions, lots of feelings, lots of physical sensations that can be painful and difficult. And the idea is we are bringing an attitude of receptivity and interest rather than judgment of. So if you find yourself saying, oh, I should be better than this, or I shouldn't feel this, or how come my body is doing this, or why is my mind, that I would say would not be helpful. And you would want to bring a lens of interest, curiosity, and receptivity to that. So as you see judgment arise, you actually back up into that and you receive that. So then you come out of the story of the judgment and you actually see it with more of a receptive, curious, interest, compassionate mind. And you just do that over and over and over again. So I hope that was helpful. If, one of the downfalls of this is that we can't really have too much of a back and forth. So I hope that helped.
All right. This person is asking about how long should they expect to be practicing before they see results?
Yeah. So I mentioned early on that practice and benefits are proportional. And for each of us, it's going to be a little different. I mean, our wiring, sort of our DNA, our mind and body, we're all a little bit different. But the way to tell if it's working is to see how your life is going. And by that, I mean, if you start to, let's say you do the 5 by 5 by 5, right? And I would say just begin to notice, because you're cultivating awareness in your day-to-day life. You're sort of taking it off the cushion into the world. Just start to notice if minor irritations you have a little more space with. Are you a little less contracted when that person cuts you off in traffic? Are you a little less contracted when there is a minor irritation in your household? So that's really how you start to tell is, how's it going for you? And be kind with yourself too. I mean, this is a lifelong practice, this, and I think for myself personally, I would have these moments of surprise where I would be like, oh, wow, I handled that a little differently than I would have 2 years ago. Or, so sometimes it just arises and you're like, I didn't do that usual habitual thing that I do. Yeah.
All right. So somebody's asking about having some difficulty connecting with the breath, and whether or not, well, first, is that normal, and secondly, is there a way around that?
Yeah, so this is an interesting and very common, I want to reassure you, a common thing that sometimes bringing focus to the breath like we are um, can actually, for some people and at different times, can cause sort of a little bit of a disruption in the way you breathe. Like there's so much attention on the breath that it can actually alter or change and not feel comfortable. And sometimes for a whole variety of reasons, people have difficulty breathing, you know, have asthma or, something. There could be a whole lot of reasons why that is. So there's a couple things I would say there. One is just, if you're not dealing with a health issue associated with breathing, to see if you can use the image of allowing the breath just to come to you. So, trusting the wisdom of the body knows how to breathe. You don't have to alter or change your breath in meditation in any way at all. So the idea is, can I allow the breath can I receive it? Just let the breath come to me, and then begin to notice where in the body you are noticing the sensation most prominently. Let your attention rest there, knowing that it'll go right off into a thought, but you'll catch it again, you come back, it'll go off and you'll catch it. The other thing is that you can use other things. I'll tell you what I would avoid. I would avoid visualization. That's that's an entirely different kind of meditation. I would avoid listening to music. That again is just an entirely different kind of meditation. What I would try to stay more with is stay a little bit closer to the body. So you could literally put your hands together, rest them in your lap, and come back to the touch points. You could put them flat down on your thighs and let that be what you come back to, is the point of contact that feeling produces. If there's ambient noise in your background, you could use that too. You could use that as, the mind wanders and you just come back to tracking sound.
So Tara, this is a little bit related. Somebody's asking about, when they meditate, bringing up an uncomfortable amount of emotions, and whether or not that's something they should be concerned about, but also, is that okay?
Yeah.
Are they, is there a different way to be doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm glad it was asked because it warrants mentioning it again. I think one of the misconceptions of meditation, because meditation has this blanket term, but one of the misconceptions is that I should feel calm, or I'm doing this to bring on ease and relaxation. And in fact, we're not doing it to be calm. That's a byproduct, just generally having more ease. But when you remove the typical distractions of your life and you sit with yourself or be with yourself in this particular way without distraction, you are in fact leaving room for many things to arise. Physical body pain, which I can tell you from sitting long periods of time, I have experienced excruciating physical pain. And emotional pain as well. I mean, that's, as human beings, we carry lots with us. So I want to highlight that sometimes these practices bring up so much, we realize we also need professional support, and that is not to say that these practices are take care of everything. So there are times where we we need a therapist. We need to be working with a therapist. And sometimes the practice will actually highlight that. But what I would say is that difficult emotions arise in practice quite commonly. And if this is something that is, not based on a trauma history, but is, I would say just less of, you don't have a trauma history and you're having emotions that are difficult memories or, things that have happened in your past, you want to actually bring attention to feel the expression of that emotion rather than the stories about it. So as long as it's not too intense, I think about this as putting sort of a big toe in the water of your emotions and just feeling the physicality of what grief or shame or guilt, what does that actually feel like in the body?
All right, so I think this actually, is a good follow-up to that, which is, for folks who are, um, uh, watching and interested in, helping with some of the issues around racial injustice. It is like, how can we expect mindfulness to actually fit in with that? Like, what is the role for mindfulness in that, or mindfulness practices?
So, there has been some research on how mindfulness can support us in seeing our bias more clearly and being with our bias. But I think, a lot of what arises, especially for white people around racial injustice is, shame and guilt and remorse. And, there's a lot of that arises. And, these practices are, again, I sort of opened with this, but just essential to turning toward these emotions that arise rather than getting lost in them or being overtaken by them. And then allowing this capacity to inform what we do. So how are we self-educating? Can I be with the guilt, whatever is arising around injustice for you? And then how can that, the willingness to be with it, and then how can that inform my next steps? How can that inform what I read, what I watch, how I'm engaging with others, how I'm speaking up and out in a way that is skillful and in alignment with my values? So I think, for both of these, mindfulness can help us work with the difficult and challenging emotions that are arising, and then how to take skillful, helpful action, as well as just, studies that are showing that mindfulness can help us see implicit bias with greater clarity.
So, so I like this one. This one rings true to me. So the person is asking about the example of wait. Why am I texting? Why am I talking? If the person is asking if you do that practice, exercise, and you find that what's coming up is boredom, what do you do then? What do you do next?
Well, it's funny because I think that's actually the example I used, because I'll see it in myself, boredom. So the practice would literally be, and the more we engage in formal practice, and I really want to highlight this, the more we engage in formal practice, the more we start to see that habit pattern. So like reach for the phone. But there is that point where you can say, okay, why am I doing this out of boredom? So the idea is, and I would encourage anybody to try this, is to actually renounce the checking. So you've already picked the phone up and now you see, oh wait, why am I doing this? Just boredom. So you can renounce the checking, so every time you renounce a habit pattern, you strengthen the ability to not do it again. So think of it in drops in the bucket of you getting back in the driver's seat. So now really what you want to be with is boredom. You want to be with boredom. Like, what does boredom feel like? What are, out of the head, out of the thoughts, into the body, what's it like to be bored? What does this feel like? And can I actually be with this for a bit? And remember, in these practices, you'll see every thought, every emotion, every body sensation has a birth, it has a life, and it moves. So these are all we are learning about the nature of change through these practices, which is so important. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Well, so Tara, on the subject of formal practice, we have just a couple minutes left. I'm wondering if maybe you wanted to just lead us through, a brief closing practice that we can.
Yeah, sure.
We can, yeah.
I would. I love this, by the way. Thank you all so much for joining. And John's going to give you some resources, but let's go ahead and into our third practice. We'll do a couple of minutes of this, and then John will point you to resources. So settling in to either seated or standing position, surrendering your weight, and holding the spine in a way that is upright and engaged, yet relaxed. So it's upright, engaged, straight but not stiff. And just simply notice the whole body. And how are things from engaging in this hour together? What are you noticing physically in the body? Perhaps the heartbeat. Points of contact. You might recognize sound in the background. And if it feels okay, bringing the attention back inward from sound to breath sensation, or to palms down on the thighs or palms together, or perhaps points of contact along the back of the body as your focal point. And bringing a receptive attitude to sensation, allowing the breath to just come to you, nothing to do here. Allowing the points of contact with hands or back of the body just to come to you. As the mind wanders, which it naturally will, just note thinking and bring the attention back to the anchor you've chosen. And as you feel ready to do so, allowing the eyes to open if they were closed, reconnecting with the surroundings, with your surroundings, and reconnecting with all of you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Tara. So let me close us out here. All right. So if folks don't already know about it, we want to make sure you feel sincerely invited to join us for our twice weekly Coffee House in the Cloud sessions, which take place every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. This is where Tara and the other great instructors that we're acquainted with from across New England come together to offer instructions and discussion related to meditation and mindfulness. And you can find the links to these coffee house sessions at harvardpilgrim.org/mindfulness. And if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask, please email us at askmtm@harvardpilgrim.org, and we'll make sure to try to answer them during the coffee house sessions. So in a few days, we will be posting this workshop to our YouTube page, youtube.com/mindthemoment. And you can also find a ton of other e-learning resources there. Please do check out our SoundCloud page as well. We have a lot of guided meditation MP3s led by Tara. We have virtual communities set up on Instagram and Facebook where you can come and share your own insights and ideas and see some of our own. And so, Tara, you asked me to include this final slide, which I think has a great sort of sentiment to end on.
Yeah. So I can't even remember where I saw this, but this was, probably a month or so ago or more. But I love it. I think when the dust settles, we'll realize how very little we need, how very much we actually have, and the true value of human connection. And so on that note, I just want to wish everyone well. And we are in very turbulent times. There are lots and lots of good resources out there. John has just pointed to a few. Rhonda McGee has a wonderful book on mindfulness and racial justice, and I highly recommend it. So if you want to, as that question arose, further your understanding, there are so many good resources out there now. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you soon. Have a good day, everyone.